My friends, with this very special video I want to give you a full comprehensive guide concerning the absolute best and most reliable pick grip and picking technique that I found in the last over 20 years of playing guitar. So this video should answer the burning questions: how do you really hold your pick? Should you pick with an open or with a closed hand, and what's the difference? And pretty much any other picking technique related question. So let's not waste any more time and get started right away. So as I'm sure you've seen with any kind of videos that I post here on Patreon or on the YouTube channel, I'm always working with a closed hand approach with my picking hand, simply meaning that my fingers are not sticking out like this or flopping around like that. I'm not clenching my fist like this. I'm really just closing my hand, and there are multiple reasons why this is a better approach for my playing style at least. First of all, I also started out as an open-handed player, but I was dealing with a lot of string noise when I started playing faster, trying to push my technique to new levels, especially with alternate picking and sweep picking. I think this is roughly how I was playing back then. And when I'm trying to play like this right now, my hand somehow feels heavier because I feel the extra weight of my fingers. As you might know, one of my biggest problems was that I was sometimes touching the strings or the knobs or accidentally switching the pickups, especially when I was playing live and those movements were really exaggerated with my picking hand. And I personally also could never really figure out if I'm supposed to anchor my fingers on the guitar body like this, or if they never should touch the guitar at all, which is kind of difficult. To me, it always felt like something's kind of wrong with my picking technique, something is holding me back. But when I started studying jazz guitar at the conservatory in Vienna, I saw a lot of super fast and very clean jazz players play scale lines like this. Of course, with a clean channel most of the time and with those big semi-hollow guitars, but they were playing so fast, over 300 beats per minute with those up-tempo jazz standards. And here's the main thing, it looked and sounded effortless. While I could also play fast back then, I was still stuck in my early metal way of playing, so kind of using a lot of my arm, the open hand picking approach. I think this is roughly how I was sounding back then. So the speed was kind of there, but it didn't exactly sound elegant, especially with less distortion or with a clean channel. And I was also not really in control of the note values that I was playing. So in my case, with the open-handed approach, I couldn't really feel the individual 16th notes or triplets that I was playing. Often I was just going as fast as possible with this kind of up and down movement. And when a teacher called me out on that, saying that it's nice that I can play that fast, but that I'm just playing completely random note values, I'm not in sync with the backing band, I'm not playing triplets, I'm not playing 16th notes, I knew that I had a bigger problem right here. So it wasn't just about string noise anymore or about touching parts of my guitar. It was about asking myself, how can I get more control over my playing, especially at fast tempos, with alternate picking but also with sweep picking. My friend, I have one very important information before we continue. If you're serious about improving your picking technique and you want to take it from this to this in just 30 days, remember that I put together a special 30-day alternate picking masterclass and workout challenge that has helped over 40,000 happy students by now with achieving their dream picking technique. So let's finally take your picking technique to a world-class level as well over the next 30 days. Just click the link in the description or in the first comment down there. Get started today. I'm waiting for you inside. So how can I start feeling the note values, playing them in time, although I'm playing super fast? And my personal solution for this problem was just taking a close look at what these advanced fusion and jazz style guitar players are doing. And the biggest difference I could personally observe is that they all don't play like this. All of the technical, super impressive, super clean players played like this, with a closed hand. So it's safe to say that this was one of my big light bulb moments back then, and this is what drew me to this playing style initially. But before we go on, I want to mention once again, of course there are amazing players that play with an open hand approach as well. This is a lot about identifying what you want, meaning how you want to sound like, what kind of material you want to play or compose. I can't recommend enough to do your own thing and to find out what works for you. But if you want to achieve a certain playing style or level of virtuosity, and you literally see that all players, or let's say 98% of them, use this one approach, I think it's safe to say that this is probably not a coincidence. So with this video I don't exactly want to tell you this is right, this is wrong. I just want to encourage you to try it, because this was a huge game changer for me. But how do you go about reconstructing your picking technique? Maybe after years and years of playing with a different approach? This is something I read very often in the Patreon VIP member Facebook group, where people say, well, I tried the closed hand approach now for 2 days. It simply feels awkward to me. I don't think it's right. I'm gonna stick to my way of playing. And then I sadly never really see them getting better with their own approach, kind of sabotaging their own progress. So to take my journey as an example, when I switched from open to closed hand, it took me quite a long time, a couple of months to adjust. I actually started out with some exercises that I showed you recently, mainly 2-note per string stuff. So just playing arpeggios or chord shapes with 2 picking strokes per string. And I was also naturally using more of my wrist playing like this, and I wasn't playing like that anymore, kind of like a barbarian. It was also difficult to use all of that in a live music context, because I was touring a lot and I practiced these songs for years with an open hand approach. So that was kind of hardwired into my mind when I was playing live. So I was doing fine at home with that new picking approach, kind of building that step by step. But as soon as I went out on stage, this happened and I started going back to what I was used to. At one point it became this weird kind of mishmash of a technique. So yes, this definitely takes some time until you get fully used to it. I'd say the transition period is at least 1 month until you get some good results, and then of course it takes even longer after that to really improve that technique that you're building. But right now I'm just super glad that I went through this phase, because before that I always needed a fret wrap in order to dampen the strings for my recordings. There were always some issues with string noises, I'm sure you're familiar with it. I always blamed my fretting hand, of course, but oddly when I transitioned to the closed hand and really worked on it, I did not have these problems in the studio anymore, so I got super clean takes much faster without relying on a fret wrap. I'm super happy that I was patient enough to work on this, because those are the relaxed and clean results that I was personally always going for. Now to continue with your most frequently asked questions. Number 1, what about riffs and strumming? Do I change my picking approach for different kinds of playing styles? When it comes to riffs, I'm not suddenly opening my hand like this. That's something I want to avoid, switching back between 2 completely different techniques all the time. Because in a practical context, and especially on stage, you have to switch quickly between lead phrases and rhythm phrases. So with riffing, I mostly keep my closed hand approach. But when it comes to strumming chords, I'm relaxing my fingers much more. And if you watch me performing live, you might even see my fingers stick out a little bit when I'm playing like this. Because in that context, it's simply not as important for me compared to super complicated high-speed phrases with advanced techniques. So once again, with chords, I don't change to this immediately. I just feel like my fingers are relaxed a little bit more. And another example of that is combining sweep picking with tapping. Because with that, it's kind of tricky to sweep with a closed hand, then tap 1 note, then sweep with a closed hand again. So sometimes you might see me doing things like this. So when I'm switching between sweep picking and tapping really quick like this, my hand also stays much more open, because I'm not really touching the strings that much. I'm mostly moving like this, and it feels a bit awkward to go from this to just 1 finger sticking out to this. But once again, overall, I definitely don't recommend developing completely different picking styles for different techniques. What helps with developing this is just working on different techniques in your routine at the same time. So choosing 1 block where you combine sweep picking, alternate picking, hybrid picking, legato, all of these crazy things, tapping, so that you form 1 solid unified technique. And lastly, what are the downsides when it comes to the closed picking technique? To be completely honest, I can't even really think about any. Once again, of course, I only have my journey as an example, and this pretty much fixed all of my problems. The only thing I can think about is that you might sound a bit more sterile and clean, and with some playing styles, like with rock, really going for pentatonic licks, it might actually be kind of cool to have this kind of dirt in your playing, where you're touching the strings a little bit, big movements and all of that. So if you're going for that kind of a heavy rock, heavy metal, blues infused playing style, this might not be the right way to play for you. As I said, it really helps with identifying how you actually want to sound. And for me as a working musician, I just want to be professional in the studio. I'm also releasing a new song every single week at the moment, so I want to be fast with recording and getting really good takes without relying on fret wraps and all of that. And I also want reliable and clean results on stage. So this technique is the clear winner for me personally. So since I started playing guitar, really, it was one of my biggest goals to find a universal pick grip that suits pretty much any playing style, from fast alternate picking, as I just showed you, to sweep picking as well. Of course, rhythm guitar playing as well. So I don't want to switch between completely different styles for different techniques when I'm booked for a pop recording job or an extreme metal gig. I want to have one reliable technique that works every single time. The first thing you will have noticed by now is that I'm picking with a closed hand. This is something I discussed already in the video where I compared the open hand technique to the closed hand technique. A short summary of that is that this technique simply allows me to be more in control when I'm playing, so I don't need to rest my fingers on the instrument. When I'm playing live, I'm not accidentally touching the knobs or the switches. My fingers are not grazing across the strings, causing unwanted noise, and it simply feels like there's less weight aerodynamically attached to a motion like this compared to doing something like that where the fingers are flopping around. As I often said, there are great open-handed players as well, but as soon as I started switching to the closed hand, pretty much all of my problems started disappearing as well. So before I closed my hand, I worked with a really weird reverse picking angle like this. So my pick wasn't coming into contact with the strings like that, it was actually at a reverse angle. And surprisingly that actually worked to some extent, but I did feel stuck cleaning up my playing and with building speed as well. So when I closed my hand, I also started attacking the strings like this at an angle. That's still how I'm playing today. So in most cases I try to avoid attacking the strings in a parallel angle, meaning the pick being parallel to the strings. You will see that makes it much easier to glide across the strings when you're sweep picking or when you're alternate picking. You simply don't get stuck between the strings as much as when you're playing like this, and it feels less like you're actually fighting your instrument. Now when it comes to the actual pick grip, this is something that a lot of new closed hand players get wrong, in my humble opinion. When I started, I was gripping the pick with the tip of my index finger like this. So the pick is in between my thumb and I'm gripping it with the tip of my index finger right here. So it looks a bit like that, and that always felt really weird to me at first, and I wasn't sure if this technique is for me. In my older videos you can also see this hole or kind of O shape that my index finger and thumb were making, and even when I'm holding the pick like this, only for a couple of seconds right now, I can already feel that I'm pressing too hard on my index finger and it feels kind of weird. And with the way my index finger and my other fingers are kind of pushing outward this way, I'm also touching the strings a lot when I'm playing like this. Yeah, there's a lot of string noise, it sounds really aggressive. I got much better results as soon as I moved the pick past the first knuckle of my finger and I started gripping it like this. So this is the pick grip that I'm using currently and over the last 2 or 3 years actually already. This feels really natural and it's really easy to replicate as well. I showed you this a couple of times already. You're simply holding your hand like this. It's sometimes called the trigger finger, I guess. You're placing your pick right here, so not on the tip or top of your index finger like this. To me, that's a mistake that a lot of new closed hand players make. You move it past your first knuckle to this area right here, and then you simply close your hand like this. Of course, it takes a while until that feels comfortable. It will feel weird at first until you figure out the right way of holding it and the right angle. This is how it looks like in my case. This works pretty well when I'm playing. I personally experimented with a lot of different pick grips, as you might know, and this is the one that pretty much solved all of my problems, and I didn't really feel the need of changing it anymore. So when you move that into action, you can see that there's no big hole or O-shape anymore. It looks like this now. That also means that my other fingers are kind of falling into place really when I'm playing, so that I'm not touching or grazing the strings with them anymore. They're naturally in a good position so that I can avoid that. I don't have to lift them up too much like this, because that also results in a problem. Your thumb will be scraping against the strings if you have a technique where you really have to lift your fingers like that. And you also don't want your thumb scratching on the lowest string while you're playing. So this grip to me is a great balance of not touching the strings with your other fingers, but also not with your thumb as you're playing. Because as I mentioned often, my personal goal when it comes to picking technique is getting super clean results without using a fret wrap or any kind of dampening material. And that's only kind of possible in my personal experience when you're not always touching the strings with your other fingers and you have a pick grip that's reliable and consistent. Some quick mistakes that I made that I can think of right now is moving my fingers a lot at the beginning when I closed my hand and when I was playing across the different strings. That's an over-exaggerated demonstration, but I think you get the point. That's a really bad habit because it results in very inconsistent results. Because if you move your fingers like this in an uncontrolled way every time you're playing, you will hit the strings at a completely different angle every single time. So sometimes your line will sound good, other times you won't be able to play certain stuff and you never really know why. So when I'm playing, I make sure not to move my index finger or thumb around. Of course, I'm not clenching my fist or playing like this, keeping all my fingers in control by simply applying a lot of pressure. And in fact, one of my favorite exercises when I was working on reducing pressure is actually playing with a more and more relaxed pick grip. So releasing pressure more and more until the pick falls out of your hands like this. And when you do that while you actually play, like that, I know it sounds terrible, but it teaches you about how light your pick grip can actually be before you drop your pick. And in most cases, students are very surprised by how light the grip can actually be while still getting amazing results. And that's a great way of testing if you're simply pushing too hard with your right hand or your picking hand. Another question I often get is which pick I'm going for. The veteran members that follow me for many years on here are probably sick of hearing it, but please keep in mind that we have a lot of new members joining every single month. So the pick that I found for myself that works best is a Jazz 3 size pick. I really like them with a grip surface. Maybe you can see it in the video. I ditched my fancy signature picks with my name and signature on them a while ago because having a nice grip surface is really awesome. The pick is not moving around in my hand at all. I don't drop them on stage even when I sweat a lot and I move around a lot. So that's the pick I've been using, I think, for 3 years now, and I'm not really looking back or trying any alternatives because I'm pretty happy. The reason why I'm playing small picks is because I only want a small portion of my pick sticking out when I'm attacking the strings. So when I'm playing, it doesn't look like that. That's what I want to avoid actually. With my pick grip, I only have a tiny bit of the pick actually sticking out to attack the strings with. And that helps, of course, with not getting stuck in between the strings, with playing fast, and with not generating any unwanted string noise by kind of grazing the strings with the surface of the pick as you're transitioning between the strings. Simply sounds super clean. Let me try that with the pick sticking out like that. Yeah, also kind of works, but I feel like I'm kind of struggling a bit. So if you feel like you're digging in a bit too much with your pick, just try a similar approach to what I showed you with letting the pick fall if you feel like you're pressing too hard. Try working with a really extremely minimal surface area of the pick like this. If it's really minimal like that, it's also not good because your finger starts scraping against the string. But over-exaggerating things and details like this always helps with getting a better feeling for your technique and with analyzing those small differences, searching for ways to optimize your technique. And a couple of final details before I leave you alone for today. My wrist is always in contact with the bridge when I'm playing, so I personally cannot recommend any kind of floating hand approach, simply because it's kind of a pain to alternate between muted and open notes if your hand is floating around like this. And you might also struggle with a lot of string noise, meaning that you always need a fret wrap to mute the strings when you're recording in the studio or playing live. And one thing that really helps with keeping a pick grip consistent is often following the strings as you play. So I'm not really anchoring my wrist like this and then I just move the entire hand or arm or wrist like that, because when you do that and you go for an arching movement like this, you end up with a completely different picking angle for the lowest strings compared to what you get for the highest strings, and once again that's really bad for consistency with your picking. So when I play a fast alternate picking line across all strings, for example, you can see that I'm not anchoring my wrist and moving like this, I'm following the strings. Same goes for sweep picking, of course.